Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Your Therapist Needs Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher. To support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/wellnesswithjer. We've got merch. We've got all sorts of stuff. We're trying to be a real podcast, I guess. So if you want to support the show, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'm back with another systems thinker today. I'm very excited to have my guest on from the Pacific Northwest. Hello, geography, Alita Taylor. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, although the here that I am in is not the Pacific Northwest at the time. I'm staring at a computer from Southern California.
Well, okay. I got excited for a minute, thought maybe you were in Finland for something. I was like, oh, are we recording internationally?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not there now, but I did get trained there, and that's something.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I took Finnish in college, so we have that tiny little connection.
Hyvä. Ihan hyvä. Very
Yeah,
good.
I remember how to introduce myself and ask what time the bus arrives, and that's about all I learned in my college Finnish. Not because my professor was bad, but because I was a poor student.
Yeah, well, we just don't have a lot of Finnish-speaking people walking around. But what time does the bus arrive? Mikä kello bussi tulee?
Your Finnish is much better than mine. I was many years ago, and that was probably the class I skipped the most.
They would probably ask which bus.
Yeah, well, and Finnish has, this is totally off topic and not what I was planning to talk about. Finnish has a written language and then a spoken language that are like different things.
A little bit.
Was how I was taught it. And so we learned the written first, and I don't think I'm I never really got to the spoken part.
Yeah, the good thing, though, about learning Finnish is if you do learn the correct pronunciation from the written, you can speak you can read anything out loud that you know how to say, because there aren't any like weird rules.
Sure.
It's just that you have to learn to make the sound and things like that.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yes. My name in Finnish class was Jeremy.
Oh, that's very good.
Much less fun than, sounds a lot different than Jeremy.
Yes. Well, it's a wonderful land, and I'm a daughter of an immigrant from Finland, and my parents met at the symphony, where my dad saw my mom in queue, for the extra tickets, and he gave her his extra ticket that his friend couldn't come in Helsinki in 1961, and she tried to pay him and he wouldn't accept the money, and then he tried to buy her a drink and she said no, and then she was really embarrassed that she was sitting next to him in the theater.
Sure.
So then the rest is history.
Dating in the 1960s.
Yes.
Easier time, I think.
Probably. They didn't even, I don't even think she knew much English, and he didn't know Finnish. He was like a Fulbright teaching architecture. So, but they love architects. The Finns love architects. So
yeah.
But I went to Finland, back to Finland in part to learn open dialogue and teach it. So most people in Finland don't even know about open dialogue. It's not like all over the place. It was just practice in a small part of Western Lapland.
Yeah. Can you, let's jump into it. Can you, because my guess is a lot of therapists don't know open dialogue either.
Yeah, many don't. And, it's also a challenge to talk about it because, we are culturized and, in colonized thinking to replicate things and to learn a model and then go, oh, this is how I do it. And I bring it here, like, oh, this is CBT and this is this and this is this. And it's not like that, because at the time that open dialogue started to develop, it was only historically that you can understand it, like the principles, which are immediate help, tolerance of uncertainty, psychological continuity, responsibility, flexibility and mobility, social network perspective, and dialogism. Those 7 principles were only just like made up in retrospective studies of looking back, like,
Sure.
years behind, noticing that they did something to reduce hospitalizations and something to get people back to work or off, long-term neuroleptics sooner, and, less recidivism. There's lots of things that they were noticing, but then they decided to actually look at, well, what is it that we did differently starting from this point, which was, I believe, 1980-ish, maybe a little bit before then, when there was this, not decree, but when the state kind of tells all the counties, the nation told all the municipalities, hey, there's overflowing hospitals, try to do something different. And that's what their Western Lapland district took seriously and, did different things and tried different things. And then they looked back and they were like, oh, we did all these 7 things and it helped. So that's why it's hard to talk about as a therapist, because when I start talking about it, people say, well, we can't do that here because of blah, 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 well, oh, that they can do that there because of, they're socialist and we're not, or all these other things. And, I'm not really into convincing people to do things anyway. So I just really started to look into open dialogue because of my own experience of, I guess you'd call it moral injury, or like decades of watching in the emergency room, being a clinician and a family therapist, think something wasn't working. And, people were not, getting better. We were making them worse, in fact. So it felt like, that there was something systemic about the way that the division of the care, inpatient, outpatient, the teams were all changing all the time. So that's why I wanted to learn a different way. And that's why I went to Finland and took the 2-year psychotherapy training to teach it as a different way of approaching healing and at a community level, not just the individual.
Yeah. And we're gonna just work backwards in chronology, I guess. I guess here. I always start with how'd you get into the field? You've been in the field for a long time, though, so it might be one of those kind of hit the high points. But it's fascinating because I just had a new therapist and in training therapist on recently, and like I like to compare and contrast kind of where the field's at. I'm somewhere in between those things. I've been in the field for 15 years. And I talk about my experience as an intern. Like I worked at a homeless shelter and didn't know what I was doing. And that's what we do with interns is we put them in these high intensity places where burnout's really high and clinicians wouldn't stay. And so we stick the interns there to get their hours and then go do therapy. And who's that helping? Like you get your hours and then you get to go be a therapist, but you're not really helping the people you're seeing and you're not really learning how to do therapy. It's not a great system.
Yes, I know that driven by the economics of it. Well, luckily, I had one of my professors of abnormal psychology, which it's probably not even called that anymore. I guess it's called psychopathology. I kind of like abnormal better, but he had us work in a state hospital. And in California, where I was at the time, this was the pre-Reagan shutdown. So it was possible, there were still lots of state hospitals to choose from to work at. And he had us do a practicum in there. And these were really, really chronic people. I mean, they were very floridly, I remember I would hang out with them, during my time, and then I would come back to this meeting with the professionals, and I would be just so in awe of some of their behaviors. Or I was convinced. I was like, you guys know the guitarist for Rat is here in your hospital? And they were all laughing at me, and I was like thinking, what are they laughing at? Like, he's the guitarist for Rat, and he's here hospitalized like permanently for years. The world is like doing without this wonderful guitarist. And like he actually wasn't. He just, I'm like, oh, that's a delusion. But he believed it so strongly, and he had me so convinced. And then I also realized, why am I as an intern like hanging out with these people, and the staff are like in the room laughing at me and circled up complaining about their charting?
Yeah.
This is actually more fun hanging out here playing ping pong with them. And I don't know what kind of work I did other than just, I think I witnessed some pretty severe stuff. Somebody got a hold of a blade, and there was, a suicide attempt in the shower. And so I remember going, hey, nurse, I think there's, something going on over here.
Yeah.
So it was, it did ready me to work in the emergency room. But I think what saddened me, my years working in the emergency room, is like every place that was getting people in crisis wanted them not in crisis before they got there. And there wasn't the attitude, which is very different than in Western Lapland, in the open dialogue framework. The immediate help is, they would even say that, when there's an emergent crisis, that's when to do the meetings. That's when to bring in the person's helpers. We don't need to, like push down an emergency and get them stabilized before then doing the work, which means they've been tried on different medications, and then 3 weeks later they're maybe in some program totally disconnected from the crisis. So I think that's really missing information in the practice of how we treat, somebody who, why do we even say they can't be in crisis to come into outpatient therapy? Like, what? Like, I think actually that's a call to do it, and if it means that they need to be in a secure environment, then that's kind of our job to help make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I got started in the field. Sort of happened to me. I was in a part of a youth group in high school that was called the Prayer, Care, and Encouragement Committee. And so it was my job to, people in need, and that we, I don't know, I gave my phone number out to people. And I remember I gave my phone number out to a guy who called me one day, and I was on one of those phones that was on the wall in your kitchen, with a cord.
Yeah.
And I answered it, and he was really quiet, and he said, hey, and I recognized his voice, and I knew something was wrong in the silence. I just knew that he was. That's sometimes an interesting thing, when people are, they're not going to say it. Sometimes it's pre-verbal what's going on. And so just listening for those moments. And he was in a real bad state. He had just drank a huge ton of whiskey and had his dad's loaded gun there, ready to shoot himself. So, and I just felt like it was an honor that somebody would call me, like, and I think we're doing a little bit of a disservice by leaving peers out of the equation in now in schools. I don't know if that same thing would happen. I'd hope that someone would feel that they are capable of being a human being walking along with another human being during a hard time, and that they wouldn't just freak out and call 911 or do these abstract formulaic tasks that somehow have been put into an acronym for them, or not acronym, what is that? A decision tree algorithm. Mental health does not exist in algorithms.
Yeah. Human beings are messier than that.
Yes, and we are so receptive, to change and to environments and people, and sometimes we just need a neurobiology around us that can talk about things in a new way and not have the answers. The longer I'm a therapist, I even stopped using those intake forms,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
when somebody's ready and they show up, like, they know what they want to talk about. If I'm sitting there checking boxes, there's a wonderful episode. Do you watch Chicago Med?
Mm-mm.
Have you ever seen it? So there's a psychiatrist on the show, and the psychiatrist, at one point in his life needed therapy, and the character, and he's a very seasoned, clinician, but he couldn't find anybody. He was like, because his therapist had retired, and then some other referral, they had died, and he couldn't find anybody to get to talk about something really important going on with him and his daughter or something. And then they show this scene where he finally gets in to see a guy, and the guy's sitting at his desk with his laptop in front of him, and the character, the psychiatrist, who's sitting in the chair, and then he starts to go, so how can I help you? What is your name? And he's typing the whole time, and then he keeps interrupting him. Oh, just a second. And he's typing, just a second. And then he keeps trying to explain something, but the guy cuts him off, and then all of a sudden there's silence, and he looks up and the chair's empty. It's like the character left.
Yeah.
So, that does happen way more than it should. And if we don't listen to and do our own work inside and go, maybe I was taught wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Our fascination, and I go back and forth on this. Obviously, I think there's some gray area, but like our fascination with evidence-based practice. And I think the research matters, and I think having a science backing matters, but I think when we get too prescriptive or formulaic with it, we miss a lot of stuff. I was never someone who had notes. I have ADHD, so I can't. If I have something in front of me, I will play with it and not pay attention. And so no notes, no computer, no nothing. But like, I was the odd person in my program. I mean, I read Harleen Anderson's book, and it kept me in grad school. Otherwise, I was not sure I was in the right field because of how little I fit with everybody, because I was just showing up and trying to be authentic and curious. And that was like, well, you didn't do a formal assessment. Like, well, no, but here's my diagnosis and here's why, but like not the formal version. I can play the game, but the formulaic stuff never worked well for me.
You are not ADHD. You are Jeremy.
Yes.
Yes.
My ADHD brain
Yeah.
does make up a part of Jeremy.
And thank God for Harleen.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. I mean, yeah, it's really, really, I admire that over the years, she maintains an aliveness with the person, the moment, what's needed, what's the right meeting or what's the right treatment for the time, and that we never know. So like it's great to have studies and great to have an understanding of a sequela of things that go together and treatments that help, but it's not the same as being with a person that on a new day
Right.
with a new relational understanding of, and also what I love that she focuses on the most is that what are the person's ideas? What are my clients' thoughts?
Yeah.
And that's something that if I get rusty, if I like, I notice I'm not asking those questions enough when I'm not present to it, like thinking that I'm going to say something so clever to help this person, it's so much easier not to do that and just to go, and then there's some silence and then to go, so what are you thinking right now?
Yeah.
What do you notice in
Yeah.
yourself now that we've talked about that? And to just close my mouth and just let their own, I mean, yeah, I think of therapy as like meeting yourself, it's like
Yeah.
an appointment you make with yourself, even though you're making it with your therapist. And, a lot of times it's like, oh God, that again.
Yeah.
But we're
Well,
learning self-love,
yeah, I see so many clients who have been in therapy for years and haven't gotten much from it. And like that to me is like, why are you doing, like, stop going to see that person? And like, I don't know, why are we as therapists doing that? Like, I don't kick clients out very often, but I do tell them, like, I don't know, we'll have like a check-in at like a year if you're still in therapy. That's a long time. Like, I work with religious trauma and I work with some stuff that are variable and might have a long treatment plan, but like, I like to chit chat, but you don't have to pay me for that. So if we're doing the formal therapy thing, like, we should be getting something out of it.
Mm, yeah. And, it's also okay, I think, to allow somebody to, I mean, psychoanalysis was supposed to be for years and years and several times a
Yeah.
week, and it's still practiced. And so I don't think we can underestimate that power of the continuity of a person, even if you're not doing too much. If there's trust,
Yeah.
then there's nothing better than that. Because if that's a person that's going to be there for you, and maybe take a year off or something and see
Right.
what's
Yeah.
left.
I think being in and out of therapy makes more sense. I mean, like, I think that's a more realistic approach. You go when you need it, when you need the extra support or when you need to work on something specific or clean something up, as opposed to indefinitely 4 years. I mean, push back on the psychoanalysts. The 1% of therapists can get mad at me, but like, I don't know that that's a good model. Like, at least in our current setup, I feel like that's
Mm,
really limiting who you can see. And
mm,
I don't know.
yeah.
That's where I'm like, the science matters. I mean, like, I don't know. If
Mhm.
you're doing twice a week therapy for 6 years,
Yeah.
I don't think that's great.
I don't know. I don't think that it's something we can ever decide. Like some people when they come see me, I never say what is a normal amount.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, I just, what works for them. Like, because sometimes
Yeah.
they might need something and sometimes they might need it every month. So at the end of a session, which is also something I learned from open dialogue, at the end of every meeting, they ask, so when should we meet next? What makes sense? What is
Mhm.
needed now after we've just had this meeting? It could be tomorrow. It could be
Yeah.
next week. It could be, no, we're good. Like we can take it from here.
Yeah. 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 And I support obviously the client driven approach. I just like, again, that prescriptive or dogmatic approach of like, this is how it's going to be for every single client I see. Like, I don't know that you're prioritizing the client then.
Yeah, we don't know. And, I should be looking at my job as like that I work myself out of a job,
Yeah.
I
That's
think.
how I introduce it in my informed consent. It's like my job is to make myself not needed.
Hmm. Yeah, and we just never know what's needed. I mean, I also need people in my life like my Pilates instructor and my hair guy and
Yeah.
like those are very therapist type hats that, you know, therapeutic, we need lots of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the relational approach. I mean, your hairdresser and your Pilates person and, like all those
Coffee
relationships.
barista.
Yeah. And, all those things can be meaningful and they might not be. Like if they aren't serving us, why are we interacting with that? I kind of
Mm,
have that approach of like, let's put our energy towards things that are healthy for us or helping us or building us up as opposed to, I see so many people coming out of high control religion or having like I do a lot of boundaries work with folks and like your
mhm,
family that you were born into might be awesome. That's great if they are.
mhm.
And they might not be. We can spend a ton of energy to maybe fix it, or we can put energy towards our healthier relationships and build our chosen family. And like I think that
Oh.
some of those paradigm shifts are just really freeing for people.
Yes. There's some family origin work involved in the training. And
Mhm.
there's your biological family, and then you can choose a logical family, you
Sure.
know,
I
which
like
is
that.
like nice way of seeing it because sometimes the people that we were born into, we might have had a contract or something, on some kind of spiritual basis to be having this thing worked out, and we might have been harmed, and then we maybe could recapitulate that in a marriage or in a religious group or whatever and get abused, someone else abusing power that way. But at some point you do get to choose it to be different and realize and take care of that inner, you know um child that didn't get what they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Religious trauma is kind of and that's everywhere because that's about power.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's growing as people leave the church. I think I had an interview with an author earlier who wrote a book on ritual and how ritual is very important for us. And so many people ascribe ritual to religion, but it's not about religion. It's not something religion owns. It's natural to the human brain. Our brains are wired for it. It's just that religion is where so many people have gotten their rituals from for so long. And as we have this large migration from people leaving organized religion, there's a need for that community and that ritual somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the middle of a big shift in that regard because
It's a
there's
podcast, so no one can see, but yes, fingers crossed.
yeah, that's right. This could be the middle, we could be the later when someone's listening to this. But I mean, I'm talking from the century perspective. Like,
Sure.
because since the Middle Ages, Christianity has taken over, and basically any of the Abrahamic faiths or any conversion faiths, they have been massively like colonized, politicized. We have a lot of, and psychiatry could even be viewed a little bit that way, because the oppressed and the oppressor and the disordered, are kind of, in some ways, there's a great book called The Politic of Madness, and it was written by a psychiatrist in France, or actually it was Catalan. I'm trying to remember his name now, but he saw in France all of the politics and the massive racial trauma going on in hospitals and treating people, and they didn't, I mean, I didn't experience that level in where I worked just 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but there is a power differential when there is somebody going mad, somebody going crazy, losing their minds. It's connected to some oppression somehow. I don't know if it's epigenetic. I don't know if it's it's part of the equation.
Yeah.
And I think if we start to do our own work, and work collaboratively and curiously to create circles somehow where people can share what their difficulties are and sort of metabolize it, instead of us just being in this treatment model of like going to the doctor and, fix me. There's something wrong with me. I want to be like a partner with people going, what would help? And so maybe even the mental health therapist thing will fall apart, along with the way that we deliver healthcare. And so anyway, but my hope is in teaching open dialogue that even in our small ways, we can start to incorporate those things, because dialogue is something that is emergent. It's not me talking to you, and telling someone, or me talking to a client. It's like waiting and going, wonder what else. Well, like I wonder somebody listening to this, what is coming up for them.
Yeah.
And waiting. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. What has the reception been to open dialogue? You're one of the few, if only, trained Americans who can do trainings in it. What has kind of your feedback been for people you've consulted with and organizations you've worked with to introduce this?
Well, there was a early psychosis group that I remember being a part of their listserv, and they're doing early, what do they call it? I can't remember the name of what they call it, but it's nationwide. And it was very interesting. I was on the little podcast a few years ago, different early psychosis programs, so to speak. And someone asked me when I was talking about it, because the reason why it gets connected with psychosis is because when you study something, you have to pick a population, even though they were performing this, so to speak. They were practicing this way, no matter what the person's crisis was. They had to definitively just pick one diagnosis for the studies. So that's just how it works. But so I don't see it as just psychosis related. But if you're looking from a evidence-based practice, which I like to call, what's more important is practice-based evidence, because if you see something like, that's an N of one that matters, and our
Yeah.
clinical experience over time kind of can help us understand the meaning of things, I think, even better than studies designed to look at um, very narrow factors, and so that which are actually less applicable than I think our own intuition of looking at things. But anyway, they asked me on this, does it scale? They said, but
Hmm.
does open dialogue scale? Like, and that question just doesn't make sense to me, because it's the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
If you look at the science of fungi, you wouldn't ask the fungus, does it scale? Because it's interactive, and there's concentric things going on interacting the whole time that kind of are not in the control of the person at the top. It's not hierarchical. So
Right.
it's not up to me how someone implements an open dialogue
Yeah.
practice. It's actually, I don't want to be in charge of that. That wouldn't be even possible. But it's been something that I have learned, uncovered to me, that like my job, just because I'm trained in this, it's not to train, it's to create places and
Hmm.
spaces where the possibility for dialogue is increased. And that can
Yeah.
be done anywhere at any time. And and that's what dialogue does, is it increases possibilities. And so,
Mhm.
if people have problems with it, then that's just fine. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
they can read, and oh, I have had a positive experience with teaching physicians recently, that just these aha moments, where they particularly have been trained to work with algorithms, and thinking that they need to be talking in a particular way. And one of the trainees was like, am I doing this right? And I was like, well, what's in your inner talk that would tell you that? Because it's you get to be yourself
Yeah.
in this work. And she said, oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, it's such a paradigm shift, I think, from the medical model and from kind of a fundamentalist black and white way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's definitely something for me that I have to keep at um in check, I guess, because of my own water that I was raised in, is this colonizing way of bringing something, so I have to be careful that I'm not saying I'm bringing this thing from Finland, like it's I'm bringing myself to a space, and I'm teaching this information, and then I'm curious as to what wants to be created here. One of the reasons that we are teaching these physicians in this one place in California now is that there's evidence, that real evidence in a real study about open dialogue, that it decreased practitioner sick days
Sure.
in their public mental health services, and increased basically wellness, So,
Hmm.
that's exciting to, like your work, it's
Yeah.
like really important. So that feels like something I'd like to bring more of to centers or to, because the exercises and the learning reflection and doing your own inner work, and it does take time, and it's not a quick fix. But maybe when things start breaking down a little more, people will be more interested in that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think managed care, I mean, healthcare for profit doesn't make a ton of sense. And so when you're talking about something that's healing, I remember when I was working in higher ed, and I in a meeting got asked, like, well, how are we making money off of this? And I was doing student athlete mental health, and like I laughed out loud because it was like such a preposterous question to me. Like, I don't like, I mean, I could come up with answers on recruiting and marketing and like getting kids in, saying, look at how healthy our student population is. But like, that's not the point. The point is to have
Oh,
a healthy student population. Like, I
that's
don't
right.
know how that doesn't pay for itself.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
But there is that stigma, there's that barrier of people ascribing dollars and cents to it, and
Hmm.
wanting to get something out of it, wanting to get their money's worth kind of mentality is like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how to put that math in equation for you. Like, I'm
Yeah.
interested in healthy people.
Yeah. Yeah. I am too.
Yeah. What a world that would be.
Yeah, well, we're doing it right now, and just kind of the intention. I think we do have some control over our intentions,
Yeah.
and be having a healthy society is definitely one of them, and open dialogue was named by the World Health Organization a couple of years ago as one of the top 10 humane practices in the world. Um,
Yeah.
so some might be interested in doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of application. It's just figuring out how to get people away from that colonized kind of managed care medical model.
Yeah, and maybe we don't need to figure it out, because people will, kind of have some. Everybody has humanity, Everybody
Mhm.
has that feeling of when something's wrong, you know, and how do we treat that moral injury, How do we treat our own um, standing up for the weak, or, and we can do it every day.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably can't see your clients till you've taken care of yourself too.
Right. Yeah. So, great segue. What do you do to take care of yourself? The theme of the podcast. What's your self-care? What do you do to make yourself available to show up in a genuine and authentic way?
Well, one of the ways that I have taken care of myself is by taking this open dialogue training, and
Yep.
in starting this training center, program, school, whatever it is, because it really feeds me, and it really
Yeah.
makes me feel hopeful. Um, and I don't see the same amount of clients every day. Like, that
Hmm.
just seems to kind of fluctuate depending on how I feel. Like, I see myself more in cycles. Like, I don't know if this is the feminine or what, but like, you know, um, depending on the moon, I take control of my schedule. Like, every day is not the same day, you
Yeah.
know, and I can't expect the same from myself if I'm not feeling it. So that may just be part of my perimenopausal state of life right now. Because I definitely 20 years ago was able to to do it differently and work 12-hour shifts and stuff. No, but even then I was a person that liked to like work, and then rest and have
Yeah.
number of days off. So I think just knowing myself and then staying connected. I have a poetry bent, so I do that. Like I don't have a group, but I like to take classes sometimes, and I have a group of women that we meet with regularly.
Hmm.
Dialogic women
Yeah.
trainers. So those are some things. I like to go outside. I like to read. I take a meditation class every week on the
Hmm.
esoteric learnings, I guess you would call it that. But the interconnectedness of all the religions before they came religions.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm. So
Very
those
cool.
are the things.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I opened my own practice 2 years ago, and that was like a world of difference for kind of what you said, knowing yourself, and just a vast change in my schedule, working less hours, much more focused is the wrong word. More comfortable in seeing the clients I want to see and referring other people out, like less driven by, oh no, I'm not sure if I have enough money this month, and more driven by like, here's how here are the people who I can serve best and who I can mesh with well, and here are the people who want to work with me, how do I find them? And so I think just practicing in a much more congruent way, like the structure of my therapy is a lot better. And then within that, I don't work on Wednesdays. So what do I do on Wednesdays? I go out in nature. I take my dogs out. I spend a day playing with my kids. I go to Barnes and Noble or the library and read all day. Like I just have this open day to do what I want with it. And it's
Walk.
sometimes I do work on, yeah. And it's a totally different vibe to work 2 days, have a day off, work 2 days, have 3 days off. Like that's my schedule, and it's delightful. And
Mhm.
even within those days I'm working, it's not full. It's not like to the brim. I used to see 6 to 8 clients a day. I don't do that anymore. So, um, and I'm only 35. I don't think it's perimenopause or being old. I think it's like there's a health and like a ability to meet people where they're at, seeing fewer
Mhm.
clients in the day, I think.
Mhm.
Um, So that's all really good. I've always self-care has always been physical for me. So a lot of movement. I play a lot of sports still. I have a 3 and a 6 year old, so there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, that's
Recently, I think I wrote this in a blog, but I recently did a float tank for the first time, and I actually really enjoyed that. So I think I'm going to incorporate that into my normal self-care routine.
well, what kind of element are you in? Water?
Yeah, it's in salt water, so you're
Oh,
a high concentration of salt water. So it's that kind of weightless, floating in space kind of feeling.
oh, that's wonderful. And what's the
Yeah,
temperature?
90 degrees.
Oh my gosh, that's so warm.
Yeah, it's warm, but not like oppressive because I'm a warm human being. And the first time I did it, I didn't do. It was just there was like nature noises. It was like a thunderstorm sound. And that was weird for me and my ADHD to like do nothing for an hour and have no stimulation for an hour. But I got through that, and I've done a couple of them now. And now I'll play music, or I can kind of pick and choose how I want to use the time.
Yeah.
But it's nice. We don't have a ton of downtime of like, don't do anything for an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gosh, that just makes me think about the embryonic, I don't know, like I just went down a whole wormhole of infant
Sure.
development, and there's like that skin hunger thing that I don't know, like um do we even know like how much we need that seawater or being like this remembering place, like maybe that's something we should all be doing. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
see, I'm not again.
Yeah. Well, I talked to some clients, it's that balancing act of it's not accessible for everyone. I'm aware of that. There's a cost associated with it, but
even just having a bath.
Yeah.
Having a bath with Epsom salt.
Sure. I'm 6'3", so I need a large space. I don't fit in a bathtub.
Yeah. My husband is 6'3", and he hasn't done it in this house yet, but in our house in Tacoma, he had in his backyard a cowboy jacuzzi that he made from one of those. He called it a cowboy jacuzzi, but he made it. It was like with that aluminum, like big, like a garden thing, those things that they grow in. So
yeah.
And he put it up on bricks to get in and out. And
look at this full circle. We're going to come here. Finland's the supposed originators of the sauna.
That's right. It's so good.
Yeah.
There's more saunas there than cars.
Really?
Yeah, it is. They prioritize it. It's not just for the luxury people. It's for everybody.
Right. Yeah. And it's a normal practice of cold water in the lake, go in the sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
That's
all
so good for you.
That.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a summer project to build I don't know what the cowboy part is, a cowboy sauna.
No, yeah, you don't need to use the cowboy word, but yeah, we are still putting ours together. It's in the garage. It's not together because it takes a special thing. Electrical. We have to get an electrician to put I forget the name of the thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about building one, but I'm sure there's a way. I'm going to look into some Finnish connections and get a good DIY sauna build.
And maybe you can get back to your Finnish.
I'm going to see a Finnish metal, but here's the thing. In my college experience, I graduated from college when I was 20. I was one of those ADHD kids who was really good at school, but was miserable. I could roll in and take a test and get an A, but not remember anything from it. But I listen to a ton of Finnish music now. So I just if there's a class I could have taken again, it'd be my Finnish, because I listen to a lot of Finnish metal. I listen to a lot of Finnish music and I never know what they're saying, which is kind of why I listen to it, because it's like a vibe, not knowing the words.
Yes, it's an old language. And do you know Tuomas Rauhankari? I think his name is Tuomas. He's the lead singer in the metal band there.
Sure.
And what's the name of the band?
I'm going to see Korpiklani, Men of
the
Forest.
That's it. That's his band.
Oh, nice.
Tuomas was one of my lament teachers, which is another whole Finnish thing that doesn't have anything to do with open dialogue, but Karelian lament practice. So do you know that Tuomas, he was a shaman violinist who was a prodigy, and he would go into trance on stage. There's you should listen to Wild Heart Vision. He's got all these things to say about lament practice. And he used to run lament groups with this woman that he introduced, or she introduced me to him, and she revived the lament practice from Karelia throughout Finland. And I took a lament, I did one with them in Helsinki.
Way.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Because lamenting, it's one of the traditions that existed before Lutheranism, before the drums burned and everything. And it was the way that each village would learn to process things that happened, like somebody died in war, or the children would learn from their mothers the song, and it's like a song cry, and they would learn and follow them into the forest, and you sing it to the trees and you sing it to your ancestors and everything. And so he's on my website. He's one of the people on my website because he came to Washington. He just like messaged me like, I'm in Washington. I'm doing a lament group here in Concrete. It's in the middle of the state somewhere. And he did one there too. But yeah. When are
What
you
a small
seeing
world. Soon. They're it's like the first time they've been in North America in like a decade. So I think sometime in April, I'm seeing Korpiklani, it's a Finnish metal band, like Finnish folk metal. Like they're doing a bunch of stuff. And then
I'm
seeing Hyalong that same week, and they like translate old rune sticks, and they don't say they're in concert, they're in ritual, and it's very. One of their singers does like the Tuvan throat singing, and he's a shaman, and it's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to see if this is the same. I think it is.
I mean, if he's a violin player, they have like 12 instruments in their band, and it's a mix of like traditional folk music stuff and some metal, and it's a lot. But
yes,
very cool.
He's not a current member. He's on Wikipedia. He's a past member.
Former member.
Yes, Tuomas Rauankari. Now he's learning. I looked at his Facebook recently, and now he's learning shamanistic music from where did Finland, the ancestors from Finland came from Mongolia or something. Anyway, he's learning that type of music. That's the latest from him, but he was part of them for a long time. And I think in Seattle in 2018 was when I saw him there, but I didn't go to the concert because it's, not my thing, but.
Sure. Metal's an acquired taste, I think.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it can be very stimulating, like in a good way. Like there's, who is the band that's kind of, Nine Inch Nails is the closest I can get to that.
Sure.
I do like them, but I have to be careful, like, if I do, it's sort of, I don't know why I have shame about that, but if I'm like playing it really loud, like, I'm okay. I really am, like, this is.
Yeah, I have no idea what my neighbors think when I have like my Finnish folk metal. Oh, I'm mowing the lawn or whatever. Like I don't know. It's good music.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this has been so much fun.
It has. I know. We've covered a lot of ground I wasn't expecting to talk about. It was really, really great.
Yes. Well, we contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman.
We do. Yes. If people want to learn more about open dialogue, if they want to contact you, if they want to find your work, where do they go? How can they get a hold of you?
Alita at opendialoguepacific.com. And we also have a website, opendialoguepacific.com.
Yeah. So we will have the website and links in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. Alita, thanks so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Well, it was a pleasure.
Yeah. And to all our wonderful listeners, thanks for tuning in again this week. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.